Hello, my name is Tiffany. I will be talking to you today about the process of normal swallowing. So I have a visual here with four stages because there are four stages of swallowing. So in the first stage is called the oral preparatory phase, which is where our food or our liquid is prepared into something that's called a bolus. Um, and it's used, this word bolus is used for when we're going to swallow. So if it's a solid food, we're going to begin by chewing our food, which, mashes our food up and creates this bolus, this mass, and that's the first picture. It's signified by the green color that you see over the tongue. So when we chew, we are using our tongue and our teeth, and our saliva helps us also. So then once we are ready to begin our swallow, that's when our food starts to get sent back to the back of our throat by our tongue muscles. So then once the bolus, our mass of food or our liquid, reaches the upper part of our throat, this is what triggers us to want to swallow. So the way that it gets pushed back is because the throat bulges forward and it meets our soft palate. Our soft palate is the very back of the roof of our mouth, kind of where it gets soft. You kind of don't feel like there's like bone anymore. It's kind of spongy. So that goes up so that way like the food or any liquid we have doesn't go up into our nasal cavity. The space we have like inside of our nose. So our tongue is going to contract back, which will plunge the bolus into our esophagus. So we just went over the oral transport phase, which is the second image on here. And then from there, our epiglottis is the piece in our throat that covers our airway when we're swallowing, or covers the tube, our pharynx, when we're going to swallow when we breathe. So the epiglottis is going to tilt down, and that's going to prevent from any food or liquid going into our airway, which will ultimately result in it going to our lungs. And that's a lot of time that is what causes you to cough. If something happens to go down the wrong tube, you know how some people say, oh, it went down the wrong way, it went down the wrong tube. Well, it's because some of that bolus might have gotten stuck and gone into like the wrong tube, and it causes us to cough. So now our pharyngeal step, which is the third picture, our bolus, our mass of food, is going to be going down our throat. And so the top of our esophagus is going to relax, which allows the bolus to enter it and to slowly start going down. So then our last step is the esophageal step, which is the fourth picture in this image. And that is, so once the bolus clears into the esophagus, the muscle, the sphincter muscle at the top of the esophagus is going to close. And the esophagus is going to propel, or to push, the bolus all the way down and into our stomach. So this is the way that we normally swallow, this is the way that any food or liquid we have, either eating or drinking, these are the four steps that go into that process when it is normal. When it's normal, there's no issues with swallowing. So I hope that my explanation was simple, and I hope that these images that I presented made it easier to follow along with my explanation. So thank you so much for allowing me to explain this to you. It was very nice to meet you. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, so today we're going to be talking about the process of swallowing, followed by its stages, as well as the muscles, constrictors, and cranial nerves. One of the muscles that we're going to be talking about is levator valley palatini. So this muscle is located in the soft palate, which helps elevate our soft palate for swallowing. And this also helps to seal off the nasal passage so that any food or liquid won't go up into our nasal cavity. So the suprahyoid muscle is located just above the hyoid bone. This plays an important role for swallowing because it elevates the larynx, which is an important process for swallowing. We need that larynx to be elevated. We also have the long pharyngeal muscles and the pharyngeal constrictors. So these two play a role in creating that added pressure that we need to have that bolus travel down into our pharynx, but they do it in different ways. So the long pharyngeal muscles, it helps to elevate the larynx, which we need, but also shortening the pharynx. So again, it creates that added pressure, but we also have the pharyngeal constrictors, which are muscles that surrounds the pharynx in like a circle ring like manner. And again, it's going to constrict, which adds pressure, and relax to open and constrict again. Um, this is also important, these constrictors, because it narrows our pharynx, which guides the bolus to the opening where our esophageal upper sphincter lies. So these two both provide pressure, but in different ways. Our cranial nerves will be three that we're going to be talking about. The hypoglossal is the movement of the tongue, which is very essential when we want to have that bolus pushed back further after we're done chewing. We also have the vagus nerve. The cranial nerve, the vagus nerve innervates the elevation of the soft palate, as we mentioned before, is very important for the process of swallowing. The trigeminal nerve provides both motor and sensory. So the trigeminal nerve helps with mastication to help prepare that bolus to swallow. Also, the sensory function of that would be the face, anything in the oral cavity, as well as having that sensory awareness of where our food lies, whether it's in the tip of the tongue our food is or in the back. Some of the biomechanics for swallowing is when we swallow, we want our soft palate to come up and close off our nasal cavity, and that's just to allow to not allow nasal regurgitation because we don't want any food or liquid to spill out of our nose. Um, this closure helps create that velopharyngeal port, which is the first one. So this is due to not allowing that food to come up into our nose. And the base of our tongue is going to retract along our pharyngeal posterior wall. So it's going to do this. It's going to retract. And with pressure, this will close and make what's called an oropharyngeal port. So this pressure is necessary when we want to help that bolus travel down into the pharynx. And we also have pharyngeal conversion. So this is the closure of the larynx to prevent food from entering the trachea, because if we don't have this, then there's a good possibility that we may aspirate or we may have some sort of penetration going on, because the last thing we want is to have that food, liquid, or bolus to enter into the trachea. The next thing we have is hyalolaryngeal excursion. So this is the act of that upward and forward movement of the hyoid bone. We also have esophageal peristalsis. So this occurs in like a wave-like form, just doing this to help that bolus be pushed down further. Um, this muscle closes, which means it contracts and it opens. So it relaxes to push the food down into our esophagus. So the last thing we'll be talking about is the 4 stages. The oral prep is the beginning of the swallowing stage. So this is where mastication occurs, in which we mix our food and saliva to form that bolus, to have that be prepared in order for us to swallow. So this stage is essentially preparing that food for swallow. And also some of the cranial nerves, as we mentioned, is the trigeminal, the facial, and the hypoglossal. This stage is also important that we don't want to have any food or liquid spill out of our mouth. So we do want a good labial seal as we chew. The second stage is the oral stage. So this is also known as the oral transport. This process is important for the transportation of bolus to move, followed by the tongue tip elevation and muscle movements. It's also in the stage where we have the lingual contraction to prepare for swallowing. The pharyngeal stage is the third stage. So this stage focuses on the the movement of the bolus from the mouth down into the pharynx. So as we spoke about those two ports, such as the velopharyngeal port, they contract and relax and allow the bolus to move down. So this is where this stage comes into play. Um, as we spoke about the elevation of the larynx and the shortening of the pharynx, this is where it also occurs in the pharyngeal stage. The esophageal stage, this is a stage in which the bolus passes through the relaxed upper sphincter. So it opens when it does, but from there, it's going to go and through the action of that wave like motion, the esophageal peristalsis, as we discussed previously. And from there, it will go down into the lower esophageal sphincter and into our stomach.